All right. Let me know you all can see me and hear me okay. Everything should be good. Let's also make sure I'm all the way zoomed out. Last time I used this Ecamm Live software and it's pretty good. It makes everything really easy, but I noticed that they must have added a new feature where if you scroll, like if I scroll on like my mouse, it'll actually zoom that in. So I think my last stream I was zoomed in like 10%. So you probably couldn't see some of the things. So I'm gonna very carefully click off into the rest of the screen and we'll go from there. So yeah, let me know you can see me and hear me okay. Hopefully everything's good. I changed a few things on the setup, so just to kind of help with a tiny bit of that echo. Better today? Okay, good. All right, so we'll let everybody show up for a second. I'll get a little sip of the coffee. All right, let's jump in. So, it's no secret, Shift uses all sorts of open source tech to make all of its magic happen. And one of those pieces of tech is PHP CS Fixer. We actually used to use PHP Code Sniffer a long time ago, and then they bumped to a more modern version, PSR4, lots of stuff, and it just was like a huge upgrade path that I ended up switching to PHP CS Fixer, which is funny because now PHP CS Fixer has bumped from version 2 to version 3, and in doing so have a bunch of their own changes. So just as kind of a tangent on that, like using some of this tech, like I try my best to either PR things back into these projects, contributing to them myself, helping in some kind of way, again, to kind of give back, because, Shift, is a paid product. And while all these are, within their license and whatnot, it's still one of those things where, it just feels right. It feels like the right thing to do. So today we're going to be giving back to PHP CS Fixer by creating a free shift that will upgrade your PHP CS version 2 config file to version 3. We'll see how far we get. I've got about an hour. So again, also as kind of a giving back, I basically shared a gist with the Laravel code style rule set as it is used by PHP CS Fixer, so a configuration file for the Laravel rule set as just kind of a base of all the different configurations, because there at the time was not a preset. We need to check to see if there is a preset now, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this. But anyway, so this was kind of freely put out there, and it's gotten a lot of traffic, but probably starting about 2 or 3 weeks ago, if we go way down here in the comments, we'll see that someone, here we go, yes, someone had updated this for, PHP 8, Laravel 8, and more importantly, PHP CS Fixer 3.0. So, while this is updated and we could use it, again, I want to kind of share this process with the world because not everybody uses the Laravel code style and whatnot. So, they supplied one here, which is basically the gist reworked for version 3, but it's got a lot of like little nuanced upgrade things inside of it. So there's renaming of files, there's options that are potentially changed if you're using CS Fixer. We're not going to worry about those. Changes to the rules are probably the most important thing. I'm not sure what rootless configuration was. I took a quick look at this before the live stream. I don't really know what rootless configuration is, so I'll poll the audience. If anybody knows, let me know in the chat. And then of course, more changed options, default values changed as well. So probably want to at least note these or possibly even explicitly set them in future versions to make sure that the old default value is being used. So with that said, let's get started and see how far we get. We're basically going to automate all the steps, all the sections that are listed here. We're not going to worry about necessarily the code breaking changes. That's not the objective here. The objective here is to convert a configuration file from V2 to V3 as close as possible. So I'm sure there'll be a few things that are missed that are either not in this upgrade guide or maybe just too hard to automate. in which case we'll leave some comments on the PR just like all the other shifts do. Hey Samuel, hey Adrian, Jason, what's up? Christoph, what's going on? Thank you all for joining. All right, let's get busy. Let's go to Shift. Let's go to the command line, and let's do a git checkout -b on PHP CS Fixer v2 v3. That's good enough. We definitely know what that's going to be. Okay, and I like to just drive this out a little bit, but again, I haven't fully configured the Mac setup. I recently updated to Big Sur, so I don't want to like have it take off like an airplane. So we'll test drive this a little bit blindly, but I'll probably just, again, in the interest of time, focus on the actual tasks and like crafting the automation. I think that's what we came here to see. But we will start off with a quick test just to kind of see how Shift works. I think people are always interested in that. So let's kind of just take a few minutes and kind of look at how the Shift engine works. So there'll be like a factory test and this Shift factory test. And this is kind of like where I would start if I was working like outside in. So I would kind of just come in here and I would say something like, let's just call this CS is maybe what I would call this. And this is a SKU. This is just kind of like a product SKU. So like the Tailwind 1.x shift is T1. Tailwind UI shift is TU. Like if we go up here, we'll see like Laravel is like 8.0. Those were all the original products. So they got numeric SKUs, whereas now I'm kind of getting into alphanumeric. So we'll just call this CS, and what we'll do here is I think we have some PHP shifts, and we'll just call this something like CS, what do we want to call this? We'll call this like PHP CS Fixer. We'll call it 3x config. Yeah, that sounds good to me. It's kind of implied that it's an updater, right? Like within the context of Shift, like we know that it's an updater. So of course this test would fail. Again, I'm not going to worry about firing up Docker to run the test. We know that this would fail, but this is how I would drive out like the creation of this class. So let's just go ahead and see if PHP Storm does a good job of creating this. And we'll probably do some copy paste of some of the other things here. So I am going to jump into Tailwind and kind of just take one of these in the interest of time. Let's go back up and call this PHP CS Fixer. All right, let's close that down. And of course, this should be, whoops, not hop. This should be PHP. Okay, so what I kind of do here is I have a code, which basically this is just kind of like where some of the resource files are located in the system. So we can call this kind of the same name, PHP CS Fixer, and that's fine. We're not necessarily going to be doing much with PHP CS Fixer, so I'm okay making it a bit generic. We're not going to require Composer. There's no reason to run Composer install. This is going to be a pretty like static analysis kind of string replacement type of thing. So its type is going to be it's a PHP shift. The name will be PHP CS. I don't know what their like branding is. Let's take a peek at that. PHP-CS Fixer. Let's just kind of honor the brand. What do they say here? PHP code standard PHP CS Fixer is what they say. All right, so let's just copy that. PHP CS Fixer. I don't know. That's not really like, it's not really like enough there. There's no resource path. The latest version is 3, we'll call it. That's probably not necessary. Here's the beef. So let's slow down here. So this is what we want to do. So basically what this is it's really just kind of like, think of it kind of like a registry. It's kind of a registry class that just gives us kind of some metadata about the shift. And most importantly, it gives us the tasks that are run. And this kind of follows like an old school like pipeline, kind of like a pipe and filter kind of thing. So like these tasks are kind of these incremental steps that need to be run to complete an upgrade. In this case, to upgrade from version 2 config to a version 3 config. So the tasks are incremental, and once one's done, the next one's going to run. So they kind of just run through this pipeline. And that's kind of the engine, the scripty part of Shift. So all the class-based stuff is kind of underneath. And then at a really high level, there's just a PHP script that takes that SKU from the command line, loads it up, calls the factory to load it up, and then calls get tasks and iterates over them. It's really only like, maybe 20 lines of code once you get done with the parsing of the arguments and checking out, of course, the Git project. So this is where kind of the power of Shift is in the tasks. So that's kind of the high level architecture. So with that said, let's get into kind of the specific tasks that we would want to do for updating PHP CS Fixer. And of course, if you have any questions about Shift, just throw them in the comments. I'm glad to touch upon how that architecture might look. Okay, so going back to our handy dandy kind of upgrade guide, if you will, let's take a peek here and just kind of work top to bottom. And again, I'll make as many of these as I can. The rest may have to be finished offline. So just to get kind of some pseudocode going here, I think we'll definitely want to rename the config file. That's kind of first. We're not going to worry about the CLI options. We're going to want to then update the rules. Update the rules for sure. So let's update like rule set, let's call it. That's going to be the big one. And again, that's the one we probably won't finish. I'm considering changed options and the rules. All that stuff's going to be part of like changing the rules. We also need to update the instantiation. It's not actually listed in the, how do I spell that? Instantiation. Oh, I forgot an N. Instantiation? Is that right? That looks weird. I love it. It's the curse of a programmer. I love it when variables start to look weird. Let's see here. And then finally, I think this would actually be kind of cool, like a cool little test. Let's actually format the config file based on the new updated rules. It'll be a nice little test to see if it worked or not, right? It's kind of like it's very meta, right? It's very like Inception. It's like, if it worked, then it worked. If it doesn't run, then we could leave a comment on the PR and say, hey, we weren't able to format your config file with the new config. You might want to work through some bugs. So, okay. So I think, again, that gets us to the bottom of these. So the biggest one's going to be kind of this update rule set. So we're going to build each one of these tasks. I might move the instantiation up just because I think we could definitely complete these two. We could probably get an idea for running this one, and then that'll be a fun little one for me to do later. So let's try to get that far. So let's start here. So this would basically be, if we go back, just as kind of, again, an example, let's take a look at like one of these Tailwind converter ones. So basically, kind of, again, the way these do is all these are tasks, right, that can be run. And then there's also the option for them to be potentially a commit. And a commit, of course, is just a git commit. And it tracks kind of the markdown file of the commit message and body that should make up that commit. So these are all for Tailwind. So let's kind of fix these up. This is going to be PHP, and we're going to do PHP CS Fixer, and we'll do maybe something here like 3x config, and then we'll do rename config or rename file. No, I think config is good. Rename config file. And then this would be Tailwind dependencies. What is this going to be? This is going to be PHP CS Fixer, and we'll just call this rename config file. That's pretty straightforward. Why are you complaining? I think this is complaining because this is complaining. So let's try to start making this namespace. Let's see if PHP Storm can do it. It cannot. Oh, can I not start? I don't think I can. I forgot about that. I don't think I can start it. That's why it's complaining. This needs to be like config 3x, which is kind of weird. You know what? I'm gonna kick that down the road. I'm just gonna put everything top level. We don't know if, I don't know if I'm ever gonna make a PHP CS Fixer shift again, so I think for now we can just have this be focused on the config file bit. So let's just make this top level. Let's create the class and see if it makes all the right paths. Yes, it does. All right, cool. So this extends a top-level task, which gives us a perform. So this is pretty straightforward. It just extends a task. It lets me know and manipulate that in kind of that run loop that we were talking about earlier. If it is a task, then I can call perform. If it's not a task, I can do some further inspection. For example, see if it's a commit. If it's a commit, then I can, make the commit, right? So what we're going to want to do here is, what do we need to do? We basically need to find the file. Oops, not that. Here's kind of the mapping of what this should look like. So that didn't really paste super awesome, but it'll give us an idea. So we need to rename the config file, and then we would need to rename any cache file if present. I normally Getignore that, but someone might commit it for, CI optimization reasons. I'm not sure. So that should probably be ignored, but let's be thorough and fix that as well. So we can have PHP CS or CS dist. Doesn't really matter. And really all that happens is the CS gets renamed and it gets appended with a .php extension. Okay, I'm okay with that. Let's do this. Okay, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and extract these into additional methods. Let's say rename. Well, you know what? That's probably not necessary. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Shift has kind of a facade type look, and this facade has all sorts of things inside of it. It's a very like godlike class. Think of like Carbon. Sometimes god classes get like a bad rap, but look at Carbon. Carbon's like one huge class, right? And we call all sorts of things statically on it. No one's griping about Carbon. It's awesome. So it's one of those things where like you want to make sure, like, if it works, it works, right? Like, everything's relative. So the point here is that this shift class gives me all sorts of fancy methods I can do. So one of which is just to run a raw command. And I know the workers are all, Unix-based systems, so I think the thing to do would just be to run a find command in the current directory, check for a file, and see if its name is, .php CS, right? Like all these start with that. So if we find anything like that, then, we know that we're going to probably want to do something to update that file name. So we'll just say name. I think I do need to escape these. So this would be like .php CS star. So we want to like kind of quote that and then print out the result is the proper command. Why am I expecting, oh, it doesn't like all these. There we go. I've noticed that in PHP Storm, the latest version, it actually like kind of, I don't know, it gives you an error even though like an error's farther down. Like I get why they do that, but I would rather have seen these like red squiggly. Anyway, neither here nor there. If for some reason output's empty, then we would know they don't really have a PHP CS file. I kind of feel like if that's the case, I would run a throw a new unmet shift requirements expectation and say something like no PHP CS Fixer config found. Or could not find, that sounded weird. Could not find PHP CS Fixer config file. There we go. So this will actually get thrown, it gets caught higher up by the engine, and it'll actually send that special code back to the front end being the Laravel Shift website, and it'll actually give you a nice little pop-up and tell them that kind of in the UI, and that's powered by Pusher. So that, you know, again, it'll get sent back all in real time, and it'll tell them, you know, a nicer version of this. But the point is, we know that something's wrong here. Like you went to run this config file updater, and we couldn't even find a config file for you. So like something is amiss. Okay, if we get these back, then we need to parse output, and this would be like the paths that are found. So we could do something like preg split, and we'll just split that on new lines and output. And these are our files. And now it's a simple game of just swapping those out. So we can just do a nasty for each loop. Paths in, whoops, I was writing Node the other day for the Workbench Express app. So path is path, and let's just basically, we could actually be a little bit fancy here. Really, we know that we would basically want to take the path and let's just call this like new, or maybe destination. A renamed path, I don't know, naming stuff's hard. We'll leave it destination for now. So this would be like str replace, basically .php CS with .php CS Fixer, and then that would handle pretty much all these. Yeah, and then this would be path, right? And then we could go so far as to say if string contains, the string would be path, and if it contained .cache, then we would want to go so far as, or well, actually, if string not contains, then we would say destination .equals .php. So if it's not the cache file, then we extend a .php. So basically we said, look, any PHP CS replace with PHP CS Fixer. So that's going to handle all of these. And if you're not the cache file, then we want to tack on a .php. And then we would want to run another system command to move those two files. So that's pretty simple. Shift command, and then we would say move path, whoops, to destination. Cool. Done. All right. Let's check the comments. Adrian, you should scan .getignore and replace the cache too. I like it. I like it a lot. Let's do it. I like making these like as thorough as possible. So I think that'll be pretty good. So let's do this. Let's do this update get ignore. Let's just, I think I'm going to end up breaking these out. So let's drop that out of the mix. I wonder what, the interesting thing is, like, you could have, I guess you could have this PHP CS Fixer file in like in a really weird place. So like which get, like what I'm thinking is which Getignore is it in? You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know which Getignore it is. I think v2 config files can already contain, so it's worth making sure it doesn't already. Yes, it is worth making sure. Let's just do it for giggles. And again, I can test drive these as well. Yeah, it would. Theoretically, the Getignore file would be at the same level as that, but you never know. You know, you could have PHP CS Fixer files, like it could be like a mono repo, and someone could put that in the Getignore like at the very top level of the project, or get ignored only for certain. You know, trust me, I've seen a lot of projects. It could happen. So let's say string ends with path.php. There we go. That should take care of what Beggs is saying. So yeah, if it's the .cache file, obviously ignore it, and if it already has a .php extension, ignore it. So yeah, that should take care of that, and I'll write some test cases up to make sure life is good there. The Getignore is interesting. I think if you wanted to be like super thorough, man find. I think I want to say there's like a contains. I thought you could search a file for something. I mean, of course I could do a grep command, but like this one's interesting. I definitely like it. I don't want to get too caught up on it though. In the interest of time, I want to make sure we can move on to some of the more interesting tasks. So I'm just going to leave this as a to-do. Scan project.getignore files for .php cs.cache. That's really what we're going to do, right? I'm just going to write like some generic Unix command that's going to scan any specific .getignore file within the project. So, you know, that's going to look something like, you know, grep-r, you know, f-e .php, you know, cs.cache, you know, in, this will be the interesting part, but, you know, it'll be something like, you know, /.getignore or something. So anyway, cache and maybe also the non-dist. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, there could be other things. So really, I'd want to just scan for any kind of .php CS file and make sure that I do the similar update there. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what this is going to look like. It's basically going to scan only to Getignore files for some kind of like PHP CS thing here. So I might just do like even like a similar find command, you know, and then pipe it to grep. So probably something like that. Yeah, definitely. Good points. Very thorough. I like it. Those kind of little touches are what make Shift, I think, like really, really sweet. You know, really impressive to people. So those are great. Those are the things I really like to look for and find. And I'm always tweaking older shifts. You know, I use them myself. I do some consulting to upgrade projects. So like if I see little things like that, even on like a 5.1 upgrade, you know, I'll take the time to make those little tweaks. I think those are important. Okay, we renamed the config file as well as the Getignore. Awesome. Let's see. Initialize or initialization. Did I spell that correctly? Is it? No, that's like British. Initialization. That's got to be a word. I'm off with my words today. Yeah, initialization. I don't know why they don't like that. Anyway, let's do initialization. And I probably won't make a commit for that because that's just all kind of part of updating the config. So like that'll end up being, you know, down here after the rule set. I'll do something like PHP CS Fixer, like this will be like update config, real generic. But yeah, let's do this. And same thing, extends task. Now the fun part starts. We'll need to, so let's kind of pseudo code this out. We'll basically need to find the configuration file. And then basically, the simplest thing we can possibly do is replace, config create basically with, some kind of, I think it's like a new config is the way they do it now, or something like that. Let's go check it out. Oh, did I zoom in? No, I didn't. Good. I tabbed over the thing. Let's take a look at what they'd commented with like the updated version. So obviously all these checks, and this will be a good before and after test when I do go back and backfill those. But this is the piece I'm talking about. New to version 3 is also the way in which you kind of instantiate the instructions here. So let's take a look at the config file and see how they did it. Yeah, see, they just make a new config and var it off. So there's a couple different things you can do. You could do this. I kind of like that inline approach. I think that's pretty smooth. It's going to end up working kind of no matter what. I wonder what their old, I wonder if they have an old docs. No, they don't, of course. Or maybe it's like 2x or something. What is, I want to see what the old docs recommended. Let's check this out real quick. Config file. Oh, I bet you this was changed. That's not accurate. I'm just curious now. Yeah, 7 months ago. Do not use deprecated create method. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah, see, they used to do it inline. So it's pretty likely that more people are going to have this than the other way around. It's not going to hurt anything, again, if I just replace, this kind of piece. So we'll kind of let people tell me that that's wrong. That's the other thing about Shift. Like, there's no point in trying to think of like every possible scenario, because really like people write code in crazy ways, like different than the way all of us write code. Like everyone's just a little bit different, and that's fine. But if you try to like rack your brain, I'd never launch anything. So I end up kind of just writing it the naive way that kind of covers, my bases and stuff. But anyway, I think this is going to be a fine start, even if it ends up with like a weird line that's like, put together. I guess the only thing that could be weird this wouldn't cover is if they did have like this kind of prefix here of like PHP CS Fixer, right? We'd need to honor that here. So let's just keep that in mind. All right, let's make this happen. I'm gonna need to find the config file. So let's do config equals, this is probably gonna be something that I use elsewhere. So I'm just gonna make find config, and let's just have this do the thing. It's actually gonna look very, very close to kind of what this does. So let's just borrow this command. I suppose you could store it off, but you never know. People could have multiple config files, so we just want to take care of that. Okay, so we're really going to run the exact same command, but this time, since we know it's downstream, we need to be mindful and say PHP CS Fixer, and then kind of star, right? There could be all sorts of stuff kind of behind that, but ultimately ending in a .php. So that's going to find what we want. There really shouldn't be an empty output. I'm going to kind of ignore that. And we could get multiple paths back. I suppose you could have a local and a dist in your project. That's quite strange, though. I'm just going to say paths 0 here. Again, we'll let the wheels fall off that, but let's just kind of keep moving forward in the interest of time. So I'm going to get the contents of that config file. And again, Shift has a wrapper for all this stuff. So get file contents is one of them. Config. And then let's do contents equals preg replace. of kind of this little bit here, and we'll go out to regex express and kind of use that. So let's do contents. Let's just finish out our code here, and then shift, put file contents, whoops, config contents. Okay, so that's roughly how that's going to work. Yeah, path contents. Okay, cool. So that's roughly how that's going to work. So again, pretty much already done there, except for the fact that we need this fancy regex. So instead of see me just kind of headshot this, let's actually write it together and go from there. So let's do regex 101, and let's put kind of the test string here. So let's go back to what we had, and let's also borrow kind of what they had. So let's do both of these. So let's say something like create, and we'll just, just to make this fun, we'll do something like that. And then let's also do something like this, right? Because that's the way I wrote it, and I just import the create at the top. And this, again, is somewhat irrelevant, but let's just say something like set rules, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so we know we really need to go to the very beginning of this line to kind of make sure we inject the new in the right spot. So we know that it has to be PHP CS Fixer, though. It can't be some arbitrary other namespace unless someone's aliasing their code. Again, in which case I'm not going to solve that today. It shouldn't also be global namespaced either, but we should at least allow that. So let's say you can have that, and then you can have PHP optionally. You can have that, and then you have PHP CS Fixer, and then that as well, and then config, create, and then this, right? So you have to be able to match that, but we want to take this other side. So even this itself is optional. So there we go. Now we match both, and basically that's our regular expression. I don't think there's a need to really search farther before that. And let's take it. So let's drop that in here. And what are they complaining about? Redundant group nesting. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Let's do that. Yeah, because if you have the global fully qualified, that's fine. Unclosed capture group, that seems untrue. I think it's because it thinks we're escaping this question mark now, which we're not. I'm going to leave that alone. I've seen PHP Storm mess up parsing regexes before, so I'm going to leave that alone. We would replace this with new space $1. Oh, the chat's in the way. Hold on a sec. And then config. And I don't think they do it with parentheses. I don't know. Let's see what the way they do it is now. They do say new config with parentheses. Let's honor that. I suppose the rule set will clean that up when we format it. So yeah, we'll leave that alone. Cool, there we go. I think that's going to work out pretty well. We'll see it in action here. Well, probably won't have time to see it in action during the live stream, but obviously you'll be able to run this on your projects here in a couple days. All right, good enough for me. That's just going to be part of the initialization. So let's go ahead and kind of pseudocode this next one, and then I'll probably call it quits there because I ran out of coffee and I didn't bring water, so mouth's going to get dry here in a bit. Let's do, what do we want to call this? Update rules. It's kind of implied that we're updating, so we'll just call this rules. Maybe convert rules. I like that. Same argument. I'm having trouble naming stuff today. All right, same thing. Extends, task, method stubs. Oops. I need to switch my, hey Christoph, if you're still in the stream, how do I update my like smart template to get rid of those extra line breaks? I haven't finished watching your video course, in fairness, so I apologize, but if you're still in there, let me know in the chat like where I go to change that. Okay, let's get a rough idea. This one's going to be the crazy one. We need to start changing these rules based on all of the stuff they have here. Now, of course, this is pretty straightforward. You could do simple string replacement on a lot of these, but there's going to be some that aren't. So let's kind of address both of these, and then that's where we'll kind of end things. So let's go back to initialization. I'm going to need to borrow this, so let's just go ahead and put it here. That way we have the same thing, and I can always split that out into like a trait or something later. So let's find the config, and then we're still going to get the contents of the file, and now we're going to kind of like do the stuff. So here we can say something like contents equals this replace I'm going to call this simple rules. Yeah, and then there's going to be like a replace. Yeah, replace simple rules, replace configured rules, I guess. And then there's finally going to be like a replace options, probably. Like replace rule options. Yeah, all right, let's take a look at these. And this, of course, is going to get contents. So instead of kind of crufting that up, I like to be able to come into the perform and kind of see real high level what this is doing. Like, in fact, going back to that rename config, like eventually I'll probably pull this out and have this be something like, you know, change config file name or something like that. So that way it's just nice and easy to see what I'm doing. So anyway, going back to the rules, let's talk about these for a sec, and then I'll call it quits. Okay, the replace simple rules is pretty easy. We'll just map a translation and string replace. So we'll just kind of like loop and then string replace and then ultimately return contents, right? It's pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and make those happy. All right. So as far as map a translation, basically what I mean is if we go back up here, I'm just going to go through each one of these, and any one that doesn't have like a new configuration change, you know, this is really all it is. It's just going to be like changes or something, and I'll just, you know, get all these in here and then turn them into an array with some fancy, you know, PHP Storm, you know, text manipulation keyboard tricks. So, but the point is, there'll just be a huge mapping of those. We'll kind of just do for each on the changes, or even get, you know what? It's all just a string replace. Well, we could get fancy with like just a single array mapping of a string replace, but we might want to be just a bit fancier than that. I would trust most of these names are pretty unique given the context of what we're talking about here, the configuration file. You know, but maybe method separation is used elsewhere, so I don't want to go replacing the wrong thing. So I do think I will end up using a preg, like a preg replace here, and whether or not I pack that down later is a different story. But let's just do something here where we know that we box this in with like some kind of quote, like whether you single or double quote it, you know, that's up to you. And then it'll be our preg quote of the change, and then basically a back reference to the same quote. And then we would replace that with $1 dot, I guess this is kind of like new, or sorry, old and new, old and new, old and new, new, and then $1 in contents. There we go. All right, so there, that one's done. So basically I just need to kind of, I just need to do map remaining simple rule changes. So yeah, anywhere where we find that kind of reference, so long as it's kind of boundaried by some quotes, then we would replace it, preserving the quotes to the new name. So that's going to be a pretty simple one. And the options one's going to look pretty darn close to that as well. In fact, we may find that, you know, again, this ends up becoming even another private method that these both share. So that'll be a to-do, but we know what that kind of looks like. So just to kind of keep powering forward to kind of the cool part. So let's get to the absolutely hard one. So what we're talking about here is these. And what these look like is going to be a bit different. So let's see if I have an example of one of these in, I don't. I'd like to find an example, but instead I'm just going to type it. Sorry, just checking the comments here. Adrian, I assume you need reflections here because it could be a subclass of config2. Are there subclasses? What? I guess if you wrote your own config. Again, I'm looking for kind of like the 90%. I'm looking for like the majority here. If you're doing crazy stuff with PHP CS config, like, you know, I'm not covering those bases, right? Like, I'm not covering all these interface changes and stuff. That's not what I'm after. I'm after just the config file changes. So, you know, worst case scenario, it's going to miss your one line where you instantiate the config. You can fix that. And I can even go back and make a check to see if it doesn't do any replacement, like to leave a warning that, hey, we couldn't find it. You may want to check it. So I'm okay. I can live with that, and I think people will too. Use Matt Allen. Yeah, I'll take a look at that later. But yeah, I don't think that's something I'm going to cover. Again, free shift, something to knock out in a couple hours. Glad to give it back, but this is not going to be like my day job is supporting this thing. Okay, let's talk about this and kind of how I'm going to fix it, how I'm going to convert it, and we'll kind of go from there. So this is going to return a string. Okay, so what this looked like before is basically like Blake line return, and then, you know, you'd say something like true. That's kind of the old way. So this is like v2. And now what they're saying is they've kind of consolidated this into, in v3, a kind of universal rule, I guess they're calling it, but now it has options. And so what they want you to do inside of here is, you know, to say something more along the lines, well, let's just make this a one-liner. So what they would want you to do in here is say statements return. So this is the equivalent. So it's not just replacing this like we did in those simple rules or like we're going to do in the simple options. This is more of a, you know, you have to now kind of convert this. Now, this may be pretty easy if we knew that every single one of these new ones like did not exist before. Or, well, sorry, I copied the wrong thing here. This is that. There we go. So it's not only got a new rule name, but then it has options instead of just a generic true. Now, if blank line before statement totally didn't exist before, then we would know like, hey, we can just do a one-to-one replacement. But my guess is, given the amount of these that have changed, if I took the time to go through, my assumption would be that one of these, already existed before, and now they've just added kind of an additional configuration option for it. So for those reasons, I don't think it's just a simple larger string replacement. I think this is going to be the one that requires some parsing. So what I'm probably going to end up doing is I'm probably going to do something like find the old rule, and then I'm going to let's just call this string capture the value. And what I'm talking about here with the value is this. Okay? So I'm basically going to take what it was and then take the kind of the right side or the value side of this array, and I'm going to send that through a PHP parser. So send through PHP parsing, or let's just say, instead of send through, we'll just say parse parse into AST, abstract syntax tree. What this is going to allow me to do is give me kind of a data object that's going to allow me to kind of inspect that. Because this example is really simple, but what if you had, again, what if you had in V2 something like this, and this was like echo, right? The ultimate result would be to remove, just kind of playing with this a bit more, the ultimate result would be to remove this line, and now this says echo and then return. That's kind of the goal. And that's really tricky, because not only are we removing the one that existed before, but now we're having to scan to see if the one that it's being replaced to already exists, and then if so, see what's on its value side and potentially inject this new option. This is where it gets really, really, really hairy. So we definitely want to find the old rule, and we want to capture its value, parse an AXT, and then we'd want to do the same thing, find or see if new rule exists, and if so, then kind of same thing, parse into AST, and then effectively merge, it's create or merge the value with the new option. So very easily said, but not so easily done. So just to kind of recap that, I heard something in the chat, so let me check. Nice stream, dinner's calling. Yeah, no problem, Adrian. Thanks for joining. Okay, so let's recap this, and then I'll probably, like I said, go ahead and end the stream for now anyway. So my guess is some of these rules, first of all, are rather complex. They not only change their name, but now there is an option that is associated with that kind of new rule. So before, I may have written something like this to handle adding a new line before the return statements, but now that needs to say blank line before statement, and then it says which statements you want that blank line before. Now I don't know, we'd have to check, but my guess is even if the blank line before statement didn't already exist, I'm sure that in one of these that changes this format, one of these already existed. I guarantee it. Maybe it didn't. Maybe we can go check. There's only, 7 or 8 of them. But if it did, then I'm also going to have to parse this new one or this other thing that it's going to try to be to make sure that I'm not just blindly overwriting it. Because if I just wrote something really simple like we did before, I would end up with something like this, which is good, but I just killed, echo, right? Or there could be other things inside of here, like blank line before, who knows? There could be comments here, whoops, or doc block, and you know, it says true or something. So, and again, I just got rid of it if that is the case. So that's why I'm going to have to end up parsing this with the abstract syntax tree, kind of pulling out those nodes. It's really, what should be over here should be pretty simple. I mean, worst case scenario, someone's got, you know, some kind of like toggling flag variable there. But the point is I should be able to parse it out and kind of reliably read what those are. Now, what it's not going to do is, like, if this is like, you know, statements, I'm not going to be able to fix something like that. So if this is dynamic in any way, then, you know, I could just give a warning. Again, if I couldn't do the replacement or the merge, then I know what I couldn't do and I can tell them. So that's kind of the way through. String manipulation, kind of find where this is in the file, look on the other side of this, and just kind of send that anything kind of before that trailing comma, like just let it parse that line more or less. I'm pretty sure I use Nikic parser. I'm pretty sure you can pass it a code snippet to parse. It doesn't have to be like a whole file or anything. So that's going to be this step. And then we basically repeat that same process if this other rule was found in the old config file as well. So again, sounds straightforward, but definitely going to take a little bit of work. So just for giggles, before I sign off here, let's go back to their docs and let's take a look. I'm curious, built-in rules. I'm just kind of curious real quick if we take a peek at, like, again, I just want to kind of do a quick search. Yeah, see, look, blank line before statement. This already existed already, so back in you know, 2.19. So it's something that you could have theoretically configured this already, even if it was a look towards the future. Like, it already proves what I was saying correct. Like, yeah, style line comment. So all these kind of already had a presence before. So I'm definitely gonna have to parse it this way. So here's some stuff in the chat. Let's see what's going on. Hey Freddie, how it's going? Okay, so I think we're pretty close. Yeah, the last thing to do would be to kind of format. Let's just write this one for giggles. We'll make a new commit. Well, you know what? That should just be part of this. Yeah, that should just be part of this. So yeah, update config, and let's call it format. And we'll create this class, and we all know by now, let's extend a task. And whoops, that's not what I meant to do. And this will basically just be, I think there's like a shift run formatter. Or it's maybe like format, run Laravel formatter, run PHP. I think it's run PHP formatter, and then we would just want to pass like the config file. So yet again, we'll need to borrow this. It's not there. Here we go, this one. We'll want to borrow this. And again, I'll probably end up making that a trait or something. That's like the third time I've copied it. And we could just use this inline. So this, find config. Cool. And I would want to know if this failed. I could say something like if not is null, output, then return. Otherwise, I would want to add a comment, and this is just kind of a quick way to add a comment to the PR. So we can say comment, create. Let's create an error comment with the comment. And here we'll, you know, we would just say something like, you know, Shift was unable to format your PHP CS Fixer file after updating to v3. This is likely due to a syntax error or missing configuration, whatever. I'll finish typing that, but the point is we'll leave a little comment on the PR. That's how this happens. I just kind of put this up in an internal stack inside of Shift, again through that facade. Everything's on there. So we'll add a comment with just this little comment model, which creates an error comment, which leaves a little emoji, a little red X, just to kind of make those color-coded and easy to spot, like, oh, there was an issue. So, like I said, I'll finish cleaning that up, but here's basically the rough bit of how this shift would be built. Again, hopefully I'll release it probably mid next week. I'll try to finish up some of the to-dos today, and then probably over the weekend I'll think about how to parse those rules. That's going to be the biggest piece. But yeah, it should update your config file. It's going to handle all of the things that are in kind of the upgrade guide that the package authors provided. So this is pretty nice, but again, it's tedious work. Why not automate it for everyone? Again, as a nice way to give back, since Shift does use PHP CS Fixer underneath to do some of the formatting to honor your code format in your project. It uses it, so this will be a nice little way to kind of help people adopt and stick with PHP CS Fixer, because it's a great tool. But I think, that config file update definitely created some friction. I know I haven't updated, and based on the comments that were kind of in the gist that I shared, you can see a lot of people thanking, the CS, gosh, I don't even know how to say that. But anyway, they were definitely thanking him or her for, updating the config file to v3. So it's definitely awesome that they shared that. That is out there if you want to just go ahead and jump to the Laravel code style that Shift uses and Laravel uses, hopefully. Might miss a rule or two here or there, but for the most part, it should be what they use internally. So you can grab from that comment the v3 version. But if not, if you have a slightly custom one, hopefully early next week, you'll be able to update using this new Shift. So thanks everyone for joining and watching live. I may do an addendum to this, maybe a part 2 tomorrow if I figure out how I want to parse those. But I think I'll just end up crushing the rest and releasing this instead. So thanks for joining me live, and I will see you all next time.